Hello, hello. So, in January of 2014, I was doing the thing I do every morning at my job at CSI. I was reading newspapers. And there's a lot of great national newspapers, and I read some of those, but I read the local Times News as well, because that's where you find out about things that are happening in Twin Falls. So I was looking through the newspaper, and I saw that there was going to be a group getting together to talk about the fact that we needed to pass this bond levy in Twin Falls to build 3 new schools, along with some other incidental things at Canyon Ridge High School and Twin Falls High School. And because I love public schools and I love campaigns, I decided to attend the meeting. So I did. It had a pretty decent turnout, parents, staff, faculty, some administrators. I fit in none of those categories, but again, I love public schools and campaigns. And so I attended. $78 million was what needed to be done, and it had a really high bar. The state legislature requires that we have a 2/3 majority to pass a bond levy in our area. So it was a big ask, and it was going to be a March election. It was coming up very quickly. So I went back to work. Next couple of days, I get a call from the school district asking me if I would be interested in being on the executive committee to work to pass this bond. I said, yes, I would love to, and we started the process, the typical campaign rigmarole, making phone calls, creating Facebook pages, talking to parents, talking to members of our community. It was a pretty monumental effort. I don't know if anyone here was involved with that, but to get a 2/3 majority for such a big ask of $78 million, it's a big undertaking. And you might, title slide, you probably know by now that this effort was successful. Yeah, the schools are in progress of being built. You can go out and see them. We have 2 new elementary schools coming to Twin Falls, as well as a new middle school. Yeah, it was a pretty awesome effort. I was especially delighted to have a celebratory drink with my old middle school principal, who's now the superintendent of schools. So it was a great moment. I was very pleased, and I'm so excited for these schools to be opening. As we are in the middle of kind of unprecedented growth in the Twin Falls and Magic Valley area. And so we got our schools. But in the next couple of days, I went back and looked at the election returns, and my excitement was muted, to say the least. What I have here is those official election results from Twin Falls County website. It shows you all kinds of different precincts. Twin Falls School District, obviously, they weren't there as other questions other than our own school bond levy. But overall, throughout the entire county, including our levy election and other levy elections that were going on in other areas, we had a 19.8% voter turnout, less than 20%. 1 in 5 people in the county had gone to vote on this huge question of $78 million and 3 new schools. And I just can't help but ask myself, is this a legitimate election? Is this a true expression of the public's will? We don't have any standards in the United States that X amount of people have to turn out for an election to be legitimate. But I'm left wondering, right? Is this a legitimate expression of people's will? And it's not just March elections about funding schools, even when the amount seems really, really high, to me at least. $78 million is more than the college's budget each year. It's more than the city's budget each year. It's a lot of money, even though we were selling it to the public as just a couple lattes a month, right, on your property taxes. It's still a huge undertaking for the community that very few people ever expressed an opinion about. But again, it's not just these elections. What you have here is election results from fall of 2015. This is a few ballot questions, but mostly city councils, right? So Twin Falls City Council, for example. And it was a really competitive 2015, this last election cycle, Twin Falls City Council election. Only one of the races didn't have any challengers, and for most of them, there was multiple challengers. And again, election results, 18.7% turnout to elect city council. In fact, the person who received the most votes in Twin Falls City Council here with us today, Sean, actually received slightly over 2,000, I believe. But yeah, which is, congrats. But wouldn't it have been great if it was 10,000 and we had turnout above 20%? Some of these people took their seats with just about 1,000 votes to spend that huge budget and make decisions for a town of 50,000. So really very few people have any input on who their city council members are. I don't know. It's a problem for me. I'm like, is this a legitimate election? I don't know. And so this is not just a Twin Falls problem, though. So don't worry about that. There's plenty of problem to go around the state and the country. What you have here, this is from the Idaho Secretary of State's website, starting in 1980 and going through 2014. These are voter turnout for general elections and primary elections. So we're about to have a primary election on May 17th here. It's going to have a lot of important offices on it, everything from commissioner to sheriff to our Congress people to our state legislators. We're looking at probably 15 to 18% turnout, right? And a lot of these races will be decided in the primary because it's really where the Republicans kind of fight it out in this area, right, in their primaries. So very, very few people are actually going to express any opinion in a lot of these offices. And it's slightly better in the general election. You can see here, presidential and non-presidential years. So this 57.59% is a presidential year compared to 2014, which was not. And so depending on the candidates that are involved, sometimes more people turn out. But overall, you're not getting better than like a low D. I'm an educator, right? A low D on any of these types of things. Back in the 80s, maybe we're approaching C average. But it's not great. And it's not just an Idaho problem. This is an American problem. Here you have election turnout from 1789 to 2014. Dashed line in this case is those non-presidential election years, what we call midterm elections. And then the solider line is presidential elections. So this doesn't even reflect primaries, right, which would be like down here. But you can see we're not doing so hot. We're like, what's this spike? Why is it so good there? Well, that was the time period where the parties were really corrupt and the party bosses and party machines ran the elections. So they essentially bribed people into participating. So when that was the case, we did really well. But now that we're not bribed and, a nonpartisan government agency runs the election, people aren't turning up so much anymore. So it's kind of bleak out there. Unfortunately, this is an American problem. Most other developed democracies don't suffer from this type of low turnout. As you can see here, let's go talk to like Belgium and Sweden and stuff that are getting in the high 80s. We're way over here at like an average of usually in the 50th percentile for presidential elections nationwide. So we've got a problem. How do we kind of go about solving it? And what are some of the underlying causes is what I want to talk to you guys a bit about tonight. It's not just voting, though. When political scientists talk about political participation, voting is usually like the bottom of the rung. Not because it's not important, because it really is, but just because it's the least you can do. Like, base level participation is to go out and vote. But there's all these other activities you can participate in, like helping with a school bond election. And Americans really don't do these things. For example, 6% of people say they've attended a protest. This one's important to me because I require all my students to do campaign work, the vote work. So only 7% of Americans have volunteered in the last 12 months for some sort of political cause, making phone calls, all that kind of stuff. So you can see some of the figures up here. It's bad over on this side, too, right? This is contacting your member of Congress. Lots of people like to complain about how they don't like what their elected official is doing, but they never tell their elected official that, either through a letter or their vote. You can see, and as far as newspapers go, I think we all know people are reading the newspaper less. They're also contributing to it less. Only about 3% of people are writing a letter to their editor. Other kind of measures of non-participation, giving money. I tell my students, not that I'm saying you need to go donate some money, but I highly encourage you to think about donating some money to a cause or candidate you believe in, because money drives American elections. In fact, in 2012, in the presidential race alone, $1.12 billion was spent. And I can tell you where that money didn't come from. Regular people. You can see here, this is from the Center for Responsive Politics. So $200 is where they start measuring your campaign contributions, and that builds on itself, so you can give up to that amount, and then you're suddenly being counted. So you can see here, 0.4% of Americans gave at least that amount. So, 0.4%, you're not even approaching this $1.2 billion. This did not come from everyday citizens who are supporting the candidates and causes they care about. We don't talk to our politicians, we don't vote for them, and we don't support them when they run for office, which means there's a lot of room for big companies, businesses, lobbyists to step in and do that for us. The other thing we don't do is talk about politics. One of the things I always tell my students is, can we remove some of the taboo around politics at the dinner table? I challenge them to go do that and talk about politics with their families, because there's this perception that it's icky and gross and taboo and nasty, and I don't want to be involved with that, which that type of idea certainly doesn't help us want to be more involved in the process. So you can see here, this is from Pew Research Center. 50% of people said they never talk about politics online. I missed that boat because I thought that was all Facebook was for. But if you're my friend on Facebook, I apologize. But yeah, so no, people are not talking about politics. Very few people talk about it every day, right? The majority is less than once a month, never. And so we don't talk about it, we don't engage in it, we don't give money to our candidates and causes. We're just kind of absent from the sphere of public influence for the most part. So this leaves me with some questions. Who isn't participating? You know, in theory, if that 20% of people that's going out and voting is perfectly representative of the population, like a really good study would be, you get a great representation with just a sample, then maybe we wouldn't have a problem. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about who votes and who doesn't, and I think you'll see very clearly that voters and non-voters are distinct groups, so we're not hearing everyone's voices. On top of that, why aren't they participating? What are some of these major barriers? And then finally, I'm going to give you some solutions, some feasible ones and some not so feasible ones, so we can kind of weigh where we want to go with this. And spoiler alert, one of the biggest problems with fixing this is to change this and help people vote more easily is going to require us to vote about it. So we're in a bit of a bind. All right, so who isn't participating? I have a little note card with some I'm going to bring out some stats for you. So in general, and I'm going to give you the numbers here, but what I like to say is people who vote believe that they have a voice worth being heard and have the power, they have, efficacy, they have power to make change, and they believe that about themselves. And so they're usually people who are, for example, more well-educated. People who have a college degree, 46% of those people are regular voters. But people with a high school diploma, only 26% of that group is a regular voter. Huge difference, right? Age, people under 30, only 22% of people under 30 are regular voters. But over 65, 41% of people over the age of 65 are regular voters. Race and ethnicity play into this in all kinds of different groups, but just one example, Latinos, 26% of Latinos are regular voters, but 38% of whites are regular voters. And then money, people making less than $20K a year, only 21% of that group is regular voter, while people making over $75,000, 44% of people making over $75,000 are regular voters. So you can see pretty distinctly that the haves and the have-nots, right? People who believe that they have power, have voice, like people who are more well-educated, older, from majority groups of all type, and who are wealthier are more likely to vote. That holds over all elections and all kinds of patterns, right? These are people that believe they have voice, that people should listen to their voice, and that they can actually make change. And then the other group are people who aren't so convinced of that fact. On top of that, the rules and the way we set up elections really disproportionately hurt people with less means, less money, less time. When the National Election Study, this is U.S. Census Bureau and National Election Study, we asked people, why don't you vote, right? And the most common answer, well, there's two kind of categories of common answer, but the most common answer is some version of it just didn't work out for me. But also, people will say, I don't believe it has any purpose. So those are kind of the two pieces of this, right? And you can see how that group of people without voice and power fit into both these categories because they're too busy, right? You only get 1 day, 12 hours, and in some states, you have to be registered 60 days before the election to even participate. We're really lucky in Idaho that we have same-day registration. We're one of only a handful of states that have that. I'm going to show you a chart that has some of those election laws in it in just a second. But for the most part, people are saying, too busy, emergency, I was out of town, I didn't know. I had this every election. I have students calling me. They've been run around to different polling places. They've been told they can't vote. You know, they just get discouraged, and I'm never going to do this again, right? They're embarrassed. You know, inconvenient polling place. We're lucky in Twin Falls. It's easy in and out, but sometimes people wait 5-6 hours to get in and vote in inner cities, right? Transportation problems. Bad weather. I'm always like really sad when it's rainy on election day because I'm like, oh gosh, no one's going to go, right? Research shows that bad weather decreases voter turnout. And then of course people who are like, I don't believe it has any purpose. I don't believe I can make any change. I'm not interested, or the choices are just, I won't participate. And so there's solutions to both of these types of problems. Definitely this kind of stuff, the inconvenience of it, is easier to fix than the belief that it doesn't have any purpose. Here are some of those election laws I was talking about. I think this illustrates how lucky we are in Idaho. So you can see some of the ones about people who are disenfranchised up here. And there are states where you can never get your voting rights back if you've been in prison. In Idaho, you can earn them back, so that's really awesome. We've had a wave recently of voter identification laws where you have to show your ID when you show up. That severely depresses voter turnout. It makes it really hard for people who are poor or elderly or homeless to get to participate. There's one state that requires no voter registration. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But wouldn't it be amazing if, you know, you were just universally registered when you turn 18 and you could opt out instead of having to opt in? It would sure make the process a lot easier, and that's what most of those European states do. Here's one that's amazing for us. Only 10 states in D.C., Idaho being one of them, allow election day registration. You can decide on election day you want to participate, show up, and vote. That's a rarity around the country, so we really have to protect that and make sure that stays law in Idaho. So require at least 30 days before. Lots of states have longer ones. Lots of states, about half allow you to absentee vote no matter what, but there's places where you actually have to have like a legitimate excuse and like submit that to get an absentee ballot. And we're one of the states that allows early voting. That's also an excellent, excellent tool we have. More states need that, right? So I want to talk a little bit about solutions. First of all, here's the infeasible ones. Lots of people, when I talk to them about voter participation, want to talk about getting rid of the Electoral College. I think it's really big in people's imaginations that they're getting like screwed over by the Electoral College. I'm not sure if that's true. It's pretty much worked throughout, all of history except for 1 or 2 instances. But lots of people will tell me, I won't vote because the Electoral College, it doesn't matter anyways. I'm like, okay. But the problem with both of these solutions and most of these is it involves an amendment to the Constitution, which is nigh impossible today, right? We haven't done that since 1992. I'm not sure we even remember how. And the states are so divided today, right, that getting the supermajority of states to agree on a constitutional amendment seems almost impossible. So national level solutions, which a lot of these are going to be really tough to accomplish. Change to a proportional representation system, where instead of 2 parties, we have multiple parties. Again, that would take a constitutional amendment. National holiday, right? Changing the election date to, say, a weekend, like they do in a lot of European countries. Again, that's going to take a constitutional amendment. Tax incentives, actually, lots of countries around the world either fine people or pay them to vote. That ups turnout. And some sort of national civics curriculum, again, really tough at the national level. The bright side of all this is that according to the 10th Amendment of the Constitution, election law is regulated by the states. So every state can work to make voting more accessible, and really we should try and work collectively together, modeling best practices from state to state in order to try and remove some of these barriers to getting out and voting. Top on my list of things to do is universal opt-out registration. When you turn 18, you're automatically registered to vote. And if you don't want to be in that pool, you can go opt out. But the default is you have access to the ballot. They do that all over the world, and it would be a great practice for us. State holiday on Election Day, a bank holiday. Mail everyone the ballot. This is what they're doing in Washington and several other states. In Washington, they've completely got rid of polling places. The ballot just comes to your door. You get to mail it back for free within like a week of Election Day, and it's counted. Super convenient, super easy. Vote at home with your friends. I like to have a little voting election party. When I was in college, we'd all get our absentee ballots and vote together in different places. Extend early voting. How about some online registration? How crazy is it that when I go to the registration page on the county's website, I have to print that thing out and then go mail it in? Why can't I have an online fillable form? This one makes a lot of people turn white with fear, but online voting. I'm confident we can figure that out over time, right? There's a lot of smart people. It works for American Idol and stuff. They get better turnout. So, more robust state effort. Part of this is changing, probably over time, part of this is changing kind of our idea of who's responsible. We have this very individualistic culture where it's it's your job to go vote. But lots of other countries are it's our job to bring the vote to you, right? We're going to do everything we can to get your vote. And so we kind of need to flip that paradigm, right? Maybe we talk about some sort of tax incentive, seems more unlikely. And how about a more robust civics curriculum? It's not just 12th grade government. It's hey, if you're 5, 6 years old, let's talk about, how you engage civically. And what can you guys do to help out? Well, take people, friends, your kids to vote with you. In fact, good research that's been, this is a 2003 study, but there's been multiple building studies on this since then, show that voting is actually habit forming. Voting is predictive of more voting. So take your kids to vote, take your friends to vote. Talk about politics at the dinner table, please. I guarantee you, with a little practice, it can be very pleasant and respectful. We don't all have to blow up like the media does. Think local, right? It seems the presidential race must really matter. Everyone's talking about it, blah, blah, blah. Here's a secret. It really doesn't matter that much. Stop worrying about Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders and worry more about these sheriff's elections. I guarantee you your world will be better if you get your local house in order before you worry about the national level. And then, if I can just, make a pitch to you, go out, donate some money to a candidate or cause you care about, and put some volunteer hours towards that same candidate or cause. You'll be doing a great service, and take a friend, a great service to American democracy. So, on behalf of American democracy, thank you.